Just a few days ago, during the 2026 Chinese Spring Festival Gala, hundreds of millions of people tuned in to watch the national celebrations. But the highlight of the night wasn't a traditional dragon dance or a massive fireworks display. It was a spectacle that sent a cold shiver down the spine of the Western world. Humanoid robots took the center stage, but they weren't just walking clumsily like the robots of the past. They were performing flawless martial arts. They were executing perfect backflips. They were wielding nunchucks with a terrifying, calculated precision. And when they were intentionally knocked to the ground, they didn't just lay there. They instantly and smoothly sprang back to their feet. To the average viewer, it was a spectacular display of modern engineering, but to military strategists and geopolitical analysts, it was a glaring red warning siren. It was a direct message to the world. China was proving that they have a solution to their massive demographic crisis. They might be running out of young working-aged people, but they are rapidly building an unstoppable, tireless workforce made of silicon and steel. Now take that exact technology, pull it out of a glamorous TV studio, and place it onto a future battlefield. Imagine a terrifying yet highly realistic scenario just a few years from now. A major global conflict breaks out. On one side, an authoritarian superpower deploys thousands of autonomous, weaponized humanoid robots, machines that do not feel pain, do not need sleep, do not hesitate, and do not leave behind grieving families. On the other side, if the United States and the Western world lose this AI and robotics race, they will be forced to do the unthinkable. They will have to send flesh and blood. Imagine the absolute psychological horror of human soldiers, young men with families and futures, forced into a trench to fight against an endless, replaceable swarm of cold, metallic machines. It would not just be a war, it would be an absolute slaughter. Right now, it is very popular to criticize the United States. Across the globe, many people are actively cheering for the collapse of the American empire. They believe that the rise of China, Russia, and the Middle East will create a multipolar world, a world of balance, fairness, and shared power. But history teaches us a very different, very bloody lesson. Multipolar worlds do not bring peace. A world with multiple, equally matched superpowers constantly testing each other's limits has always, inevitably, led to massive global wars. Look closely at the alternatives. Europe's economy is stagnant, and they are completely incapable of defending themselves. The rising alternative powers are authoritarian regimes where democracy, open markets, and human rights simply do not exist. We are standing at the absolute edge of the most dangerous era in human history. In this video, we are going to expose how China plans to use AI and robotics to conquer the future. We will look at why the illusion of a peaceful, multipolar world is actually a deadly trap. And we will face a harsh, uncomfortable truth. Whether you love them or hate them, the survival of the free world now depends entirely on keeping the United States as the undisputed global superpower. Because the alternative is a nightmare we cannot afford to wake up to. Let's look at the future of war. For the last decade, Western economists and political analysts have been comfortably predicting the inevitable collapse of the Chinese economic miracle. Their reasoning was simple, logical, and mathematically sound. China is running out of people. Due to the long-term effects of the infamous one-child policy, China is currently facing the most severe demographic time bomb in modern human history. Their population is rapidly aging, and their birth rates have plummeted to record lows. The endless ocean of cheap young human labor that transformed China into the factory of the world over the last 40 years is drying up. Every single year, millions of older workers retire, and there are simply not enough young people to replace them on the assembly lines. The Western world looked at this data and essentially declared, checkmate. Washington and Europe assumed that China would grow old before it grew rich.
They believed that this demographic collapse would naturally neutralize China as a global superpower, allowing the United States to maintain its unipolar dominance without firing a single shot. But the West made a fatal miscalculation. They severely underestimated the sheer willpower, foresight, and top-down execution of the Chinese government. Beijing recognized this existential threat years ago, but instead of accepting defeat, instead of giving up their ambition to rule the 21st century, they initiated the most aggressive technological pivot in human history. They realized a terrifyingly simple truth. To maintain infinite economic growth, you don't actually need more humans, you just need more workers. And that brings us back to those incredibly agile, highly advanced humanoid robots performing martial arts on stage at the 2026 Spring Festival Gala. Companies like Unitree, Galbot, and Magic Lab are not building expensive toys for tech billionaires. They are not building novelty items for entertainment. They are actively building the next generation of the Chinese proletariat. They are constructing a synthetic, tireless working class. Think about the brutal economics of a humanoid robot powered by advanced artificial intelligence. A human factory worker needs a salary, health insurance, sick days, heating, and sleep. A robot requires nothing but electricity and occasional software updates. It can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It can operate in absolute darkness, in freezing temperatures, or in toxic environments without a single complaint. By pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into AI, neural networks, and advanced robotics, China is attempting to completely bypass the demographic trap that doomed other aging nations like Japan. If they succeed in mass-producing these humanoid machines at scale, and the recent 2026 demonstrations prove they are terrifyingly close, China will no longer need a massive youth population to dominate global manufacturing. They will be able to maintain and even multiply their incredible industrial output using a synthetic workforce. They will be able to flood the global market with goods produced at a fraction of the cost that Western nations can compete with. But the implications of this robotic awakening go far, far beyond economics and supply chains. The technology driving these machines is inherently dual use. The exact same complex motors, gyroscopes, sensors, and artificial intelligence algorithms that allow a humanoid robot to seamlessly navigate a chaotic warehouse or operate heavy machinery on a factory floor can be instantly repurposed. If a machine is agile enough to perform a perfect backflip, it is agile enough to navigate a ruined city street. If its robotic hands are precise enough to assemble microchips or spin nunchucks at lightning speed, they are precise enough to pull the trigger of an assault rifle. The line between an industrial robotic worker and an autonomous military soldier is effectively zero. And that is the true horror of China's AI revolution.
Throughout human history, the nature of warfare has been defined by one universal tragic constant: the shedding of human blood. From the spears of the Roman Empire to the trenches of World War I and the urban combat of the 21st century, war has always been a contest of human endurance, human suffering, and human lives. But the integration of artificial intelligence and humanoid robotics is about to fundamentally break that historical rule. We're standing on the precipice of the first major paradigm shift in warfare since the invention of the atomic bomb. To understand the sheer terror of this new reality, you have to project yourself just a few years into the future. Imagine a battlefield in the year 2035. On one side of the battlefield, there is an American soldier. He is 19 years old. He has a heartbeat. He feels exhaustion. He feels freezing temperatures. And most importantly, he feels absolute, paralyzing fear. He has a family back home praying for his safe return.
On the other side of the battlefield, charging through the smoke is not another terrified 19-year-old conscript. It is a swarm of bipedal titanium machines born from the exact same technology we saw doing backflips on the Spring Festival stage in 2026. These machines do not breathe, they do not have a pulse. When a bullet strikes them, they do not scream in agony, and they do not bleed. If a robot's optical sensor is blinded, it doesn't panic. It simply switches to thermal imaging or sonar. And most terrifyingly, they operate as a unified, connected hive mind. If an American soldier manages to destroy one of these machines, the robot doesn't just die. In the milliseconds before its system shuts down, it instantly transmits the soldier's exact GPS coordinates, weapon type, and firing pattern to the rest of the swarm. The human soldier is fighting a learning, adapting, immortal entity. It is the ultimate psychological horror, flesh, bone, and human emotion forced to fight against cold, calculated, unfeeling metal. But the true danger of this AI robotic army goes far beyond the tactical nightmare on the ground. It fundamentally alters the global geopolitics of war. In a democracy like the United States, the greatest deterrent to war is the political cost. When body bags start coming home draped in the American flag, the public demands answers. Grieving mothers, protesting college students, and an angry electorate put massive pressure on politicians to end the conflict. Democracies are highly sensitive to the loss of their citizens. War is politically expensive. Now, look at an authoritarian superpower equipped with an autonomous robot army. If China sends 100,000 humanoid combat robots into a conflict zone, and 50,000 of them are completely destroyed by enemy fire, there is no national mourning. There are no grieving mothers holding pictures of their lost sons. There are no anti-war protests in the streets of Beijing. To the authoritarian regime, a destroyed robot is not a tragedy. It is simply a capital loss. It is a line item on a defense budget. When you remove the human casualty from the equation, the political cost of initiating a war drops to zero. War simply becomes an economic transaction. If a regime wants to invade a neighboring territory, they don't have to worry about the domestic backlash of losing soldiers. They simply order their automated, AI-driven megafactories to increase robot production by 20%. If the United States and the Western world fall behind in this specific technological arms race, they will face an unwinnable, asymmetrical nightmare. A democracy cannot sustain a war of attrition where they are forced to spend irreplaceable human blood just to destroy cheap, mass-produced enemy metal. If we lose the robotics race, the American soldier will become obsolete, and the enemies of the free world will be able to wage endless, zero-casualty wars of expansion. This terrifying shift in military power brings us to the most dangerous geopolitical illusion of our time, the fantasy that the collapse of the American empire will lead to a peaceful, multipolar world.
There is a very seductive, very dangerous idea spreading across the globe right now. It is the belief that the decline of the American empire is actually a good thing for humanity. Many geopolitical analysts, academics, and citizens of developing nations are actively cheering for the end of American unipolar dominance. They argue that if the United States loses its grip on the global financial system and its military supremacy, the world will naturally transition into a multipolar order. They imagine a global roundtable where America, China, Russia, India, and others share power equally. The assumption is that this balance will bring fairness, mutual respect, and lasting peace. But history tells a very different and very bloody story. The idea that a multipolar world is a peaceful world is an absolute myth. We do not have to guess what happens when multiple superpowers share the global stage. We just have to open a history book. Look at the mid-18th century. Europe was a perfect multipolar system. Power was divided among Britain, France, Austria, Prussia, and Spain. They were all roughly equal in strength, and they all formed complex alliances to maintain a balance of power. Did it bring peace? No. It resulted in the 7 Years' War.
Because there was no single dominant superpower to enforce order, minor territorial disputes in North America and Central Europe rapidly escalated into the first true global world war, fought across 5 continents and resulting in massive casualties. When you have a multipolar world, superpowers do not sit in harmony. Because no single nation is strong enough to set the rules, every empire constantly tests the boundaries of its rivals to see what they can get away with. We saw this exact same fatal dynamic right before the First World War. In 1911, the world was multipolar. Germany wanted to test the strength of the alliance between Britain and France. So what did they do? They didn't declare war. They simply sent a single military gunboat, the Panther, to the coast of Morocco just to see how the French and British would react. This was known as the Agadir crisis. This is the deadly nature of a multipolar world. Endless provocations, endless boundary testing, and eventually one of those tests goes too far, like the assassination of an archduke in Sarajevo in 1914, and the entire planet instantly catches fire. In contrast, a unipolar world, where one dominant power acts as the undisputed heavyweight champion, is historically much more stable. You might not like the champion, and the champion might be flawed, hypocritical, and arrogant, but nations rarely start massive wars of conquest when they know they are guaranteed to be crushed by the dominant hegemon. It is the fear of overwhelming retaliation that keeps the peace. Now, look at the reality of the 21st century. If the United States steps down from its role as the global hegemon, who exactly is stepping up to take its place? We are not talking about a transition from one democratic superpower to another. The nations aggressively pushing for this multipolar world, primarily China, Russia, and the rising powers in the Middle East, do not share Western values. These are authoritarian regimes. They are systems where democracy does not exist, where open markets are tightly controlled by the state, where political opposition is routinely erased. Some might argue that Europe could step up to defend the free world, but that is an illusion. The European economy is largely stagnant, choked by heavy bureaucracy, and structurally incapable of matching the technological output of the United States or China. More importantly, Europe has almost completely outsourced its military security to Washington for the last 80 years. Without the American military umbrella, Europe is defenseless. This brings us to the ultimate terrifying convergence of our 2 points. Combine the historical instability of a multipolar power struggle with the terrifying reality of an AI-driven zero-casualty robot army. If an authoritarian regime like China achieves equal or superior military footing with the United States, the ultimate deterrent of the American empire is gone. We return to the era of boundary testing. And if that same regime is equipped with an automated robotic military force that costs zero political capital to deploy, the threshold for starting a global war completely disappears. The multipolar world will not be a utopia of shared power. It will be a lawless, chaotic arena where the nation with the best algorithms and the most autonomous machines dictates the future of humanity.
It is incredibly easy to criticize the United States, and frankly, much of that criticism is entirely justified. The American empire is deeply flawed. It is sitting on a catastrophic mountain of national debt. Its political system is fiercely divided. Over the last few decades, it has engaged in disastrous, poorly planned foreign interventions, and its financial institutions have repeatedly prioritized Wall Street over the working class. If you look at the United States in a vacuum, it is very easy to argue that its empire deserves to fall. But geopolitics does not exist in a vacuum. In the brutal reality of global power dynamics, you do not get to choose between a flawed empire and a perfect utopia. You only get to choose between the available options. You have to choose the lesser of evils. And when you look at the actual alternatives waiting in the wings, authoritarian regimes armed with autonomous, AI-driven robotic militaries, the survival of the American empire suddenly becomes the most urgent necessity of our lifetime. For the last 80 years, the world has lived under a system known as Pax Americana, the American peace.
Since the end of the Second World War, the absolute, unchallengeable supremacy of the United States military, specifically the U.S. Navy, has acted as the ultimate global police force. They secured the international sea lanes, allowing free trade to flourish. They prevented regional powers from simply swallowing their weaker neighbors. Because the United States guaranteed global security, entire continents like Europe were able to grow immensely wealthy because they didn't have to spend their own money on massive militaries. If the American empire collapses, Pax Americana ends overnight. Who will secure the global supply chains? Who will stop a technologically advanced, authoritarian superpower from expanding its borders? As we established, Europe is entirely dependent on Washington for its defense. Without the United States, the democratic world has no shield. We are entering an era where the nature of power itself is fundamentally changing. In the 20th century, power was defined by oil, steel, and nuclear weapons. In the 21st century, power will be defined by artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and autonomous robotics. This is an arms race that the free world absolutely cannot afford to lose. If a nation where human rights, free speech, and democracy do not exist becomes the undisputed leader in military AI and robotics, they will dictate the future of humanity. They will export their techno-authoritarian model to every corner of the globe. And because their robot armies require zero political capital to deploy, no one will be able to stop them. The United States is the only nation on Earth with the capital markets, the technological infrastructure in places like Silicon Valley, and the military scale to actually compete in this AI Cold War. Supporting the continuation of American global dominance is not blind patriotism. It is not ignoring Washington's mistakes. It is about cold, hard survival. The American empire is the load-bearing wall of the global democratic order. If you pull that wall down, the roof does not just collapse on the United States, it collapses on everyone. The world that replaces it will not be free, it will not be fair, and it will not be peaceful. It will be a cold, mechanical, authoritarian nightmare. We must secure the shield before the swarm arrives.
The clock is officially ticking. The humanoid robots that flipped and fought their way across the stage at the 2026 Chinese Spring Festival Gala were not just a display of entertainment, they were a countdown. They were a terrifying glimpse into a very near, very dark future, where wars are fought without political cost, without human hesitation, and without mercy. We can no longer afford the naive illusion that a multipolar world will bring global peace. History has proven time and time again that when multiple empires share power, the result is endless boundary testing and devastating global conflict. And if the dominant power in that new multipolar world is an authoritarian regime backed by an endless swarm of autonomous machines, the free world as we know it will simply cease to exist. Whether you love the United States or hate it, the harsh geopolitical reality is that the American empire is the last remaining shield. It is the only force on Earth with the capital, the technology, and the military scale capable of preventing a techno-authoritarian takeover. But here is the most terrifying part of this entire equation. Just when the free world needs the United States to be at its absolute strongest, the American empire is rotting from the inside out. They are drowning in $38 trillion of debt, their society is fiercely divided, and their fiat currency is rapidly losing global trust. We desperately need the American shield to hold, but history shows that empires rarely survive when they reach this level of internal decay. If you want to understand exactly how close the United States is to the absolute edge and why the empire might actually destroy itself before this AI war even begins, you need to watch my deep dive right now. The 7 stages of empire collapse, why America is at stage 6. Click the video on your screen right now or find the link down in the pinned comment below. The robotic future is arriving much faster than anyone predicted. Make sure you understand the game being played.
I will see you in that video.